Hello, listeners. My name is Aaron Yee. I'm the Group Product Marketing Manager at Okta, and you're listening to Meet Your Okta Identity Expert Podcast, which is a series of podcasts that features our own professional services experts, and we highlight their experiences with customers and their challenges. At Okta, I focus on a product called Lifecycle Management, and one of our subject matter experts who teaches our customers about how automation can benefit the onboarding and offboarding process for their employees and external users. But today, we're not going to talk about that. Instead, we'll chat about business-to-business portals, frequently called B2b portals. So why did we choose this topic? We chose this topic for several reasons. First, every organization is increasingly using partners, right? Contractors and suppliers. And these organizations need to share applications and data and other resources with these partners. Second, managing the life cycles of these partners is more challenging than those of your employees. And a lot of existing solutions are really geared toward the employees. So what solutions are out there for managing life cycles of partners? And finally, how do you even begin to do a B2B project, a B2B portal project? Whether it's a net new portal or whether you're redoing an existing one, it can be pretty daunting. So today we're bringing on an expert from our professional services team who's seen it all and is excited to share her wisdom. So please welcome Jo Raghumathan. Hi, Jo.
Hey, Aaron. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining. We appreciate you sharing your wisdom. So tell the listeners about your background, your journey, and how you ended up at Okta.
Sure. So I'm a senior technical consultant here at Octa. I work with the professional services team, and my background, I've been a software engineer for over 10 years before I made the move to PS. Before Octa, the last few firms that I worked for, I was responsible for a lot of the third-party integrations. So that included single sign-on, building last mile connectors to other SaaS applications or SaaS to on-prem, integrating with payment gateways, incorporating external feeds, and so on. So the last company that I worked for was a SaaS provider in the pharmaceutical medical device space, and before that, it was Corporate Philanthropic Solutions. So how I learned about Okta, how I came to it, it's interesting. Like a lot of the people who joined Okta, I kind of had some experience with Okta prior to becoming an employee. So in my last few companies, I noticed the trend where more and more companies, wanted to provide like a single sign-on experience, were shifting towards cloud SaaS providers, and I started seeing more and more of Okta. And this made me really curious, and when I did some research, I found that SSO was just one of their products. They were doing so much more with MFA, lifecycle management, universal directory, etc. And this got me really excited about Okta. I liked the direction in which they were headed, and I found my way here.
Great. So thanks for that information, Jo. Can you give the listeners a sense of your breadth of experience? What kinds of projects have you done?
Sure, Aaron. So I've been here at Okta a little over 2 years, and I think I've done an interesting mix of implementations so far. I've done close to 90 to 100 implementations, and these have been all across the board. Yeah. So let's see. I've done some, several large-scale SIAM, which is customer identity and access management projects. Use cases, these have millions of end users where we've migrated from an existing system onto Okta. Done quite a few B2B and B2E. And a lot of the work that I do has been around more of the customization. So customizing the login implementation, writing connectors to port profile information into Okta, and in the same way connect from Okta to third-party downstream systems. From the portal perspective, we've done inbound federation, enabling homegrown apps with SSO capabilities, mobile integrations, and API access.
That's impressive. That's a broad range of technologies. It's also very nerdy. What do you do outside of work that people might find interesting or surprising?
Oh, okay. So, let's see. I really love music apart from work. It's a great stress buster. It can be very uplifting. And I enjoy singing. I did try to take lessons when I was growing up. But I could never continue it I couldn't keep it up consistently for various reasons. So 2 years back, I decided to take the plunge again. I got back into taking vocal lessons. I do it I have lessons with a teacher once every week. So that's I guess something not many people know.
I never would have guessed that. Would you like to sing something for the audience?
Let's do another podcast on that one.
Okay, let's get to it. Today's topic is business to business portals. So let's talk about what that is. As I mentioned, a lot of companies now are expanding their workforce. They're hiring contractors, they're hiring suppliers, and they now need to share applications or resources with those folks. So this might be some external user who wants to access your applications.
Right.
Or maybe it's a sales partner who needs to register sales leads in Salesforce that you maintain.
Yeah.
But what else have you seen? What are some common customer scenarios?
So when we talk about extending your enterprise to the outside world with partners, the most common use case is the portal scenario. So the organization now has to interact with external folks, right? These could be partners, dealers, contractors. So that's one type of use case. Another use case that I've seen is with subsidiaries who could be in different geographical areas, coming through M&A. And they have their own needs, like they need access to some corporate level applications, and then each subsidiary has its own, applications for its own unit. And the organization wants to provide and control their access during the period of engagement. And that's really critical because these partner resources come and go. They don't have, the employees are typically, their lifetime in the organization is longer than partners. They're usually contractors hired for a limited period. So the offboarding is critical. I think, you would agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and these applications, that the partners need to access, they could be homegrown or cloud-based. So the challenge really is to build a portal that looks and feels like, the company's own brand, even though they're disparate apps and solutions and services that are all cobbled up together to create the portal. So as a partner user, as a partner end user, for me, when I access the portal, everything should tie in seamlessly. So that's the goal here.
Got it. I was thinking about what you said, and I want to bring some attention to the point you made about offboarding users. That's oftentimes an afterthought for many people who are building B2b portals, right? They think about, initially, when you talk to customers, they think about onboarding the users, getting them access to the apps, but offboarding users and the security implications behind that, it's forgotten about. So what components go into a B2B portal?
So the components, let's look at it from the very beginning. Okay. So how do we get our partner identities in there to access the portal? So we talk about user stores, what they currently are, how you want to move them into Okta. This is for the existing partners because you normally, you already have an existing solution. You have partners with whom you have relationships today. So how you would port that, and into Okta. And once we got the existing users, we need to take care of the net new ones. So some sort of a registration process to get these users in. Now that we have our users, how they're going to access the portal. So by that, I mean like the login experience, what that's going to look like. And from an admin perspective, right, not all partners are equal. So some partners may need access to specific apps, which the others need not. Some partners, you might want to kind of do step-up authentication, add more security. So you kind of need to group these partners, logically, depending on what policies you have in the enterprise. So once the partners have logged in, they're in the portal. The next step is to provide that federated experience across all the applications, right? And also exposing partner-specific content via APIs. Especially for mobile applications, and let's not forget the offboarding. And we can discuss more about these, further in the podcast.
Right. These are all good components, and I was thinking about the evolution of the Okta stack, right? We started out as very much an enterprise IT company, and we're providing a lot of these components out of the box in an easy to configure manner for IT admins, right, for their own internal employees. And then we really started to build out our APIs so we could address the B2C, or the business to consumer market, that really demands high levels of customization. And they don't, these are customers of companies, and they don't want to really see that Okta's powering stuff behind the scenes. So it's very customized at that point. For B2B, though, I assume maybe some customers want their B2B portals to be, almost like the Okta internal employee dashboard, and some want them to be highly customized, like maybe a B2C solution. So I guess the solution has to handle both. What do you see?
So, you know what, by and large, people don't want to do custom work unless they absolutely have to, right? And with partner portals, it's not, end user facing. So they're a little more relaxed.
Okay.
Customization means more time, money, resources. And they would ideally like to have it all productized and, take advantage of the new features that are released. But there's really no one size fits all. There are some clients that I have done implementations with that are looking for that custom branded experience, and some others that are perfectly fine with the out of box solution. But the interesting thing is, I have seen a lot of the clients that implement these B2B portals. They have 80% of the use cases are satisfied by Okta's out of the box solution, but they have some processes that are so specific to their business that it can't really be achieved without customization. So what we come up with is kind of a hybrid. So use as much as out of the box as you can, but those flows that cannot be addressed, we have to write custom code for it.
Got it. Now, as you think about all the different implementations you've done for customers, there must be some sort of pattern that all these B2B portals fall under. What have you seen? Are they largely the same, or are they all over the place?
So it falls broadly into 2 or 3 patterns. The portal use case that we've been talking about so far. The subsidiary use case. Subsidiaries could be affiliates, clubs, sub-organizations, each of them having their own IT departments, and so there's access and governance issues across these IT departments. Another interesting pattern that I've seen is what we call third-party portals. So in this case, the Okta portal is actually embedded within an application that's managed by a third party. I worked with a company that that created like a loan origination system, and the users would authenticate into the system, and that had other federated applications. So when the user authenticated into the loan origination system, in the back end, we were also signing them into Okta. And we achieved this using inbound federation. So that's another third-party portal is another pattern. And in the last year or two, I'm seeing a lot of API access use cases, right? So Okta is OAuth standards compliant. Using our OAuth servers, our custom authorization servers, the Okta Identity Cloud, can kind of facilitate appropriate protection to ensure that only authorized partners are accessing the resources. So a lot of mobile apps that are being developed specifically for partners. So when we talk about mobile apps, there are again APIs which the organization needs to provide controlled access to.
Got it. Now, what about customers with existing B2B portals? So we talked about maybe building net new B2B portals. But what about customers who have existing B2B portals? They come to Okta, they're looking for advice. Why are they doing that?
So the main reason to do that is I think it's the pain that's involved with maintaining all these legacy pieces, right? Another reason is future proofing. So we are moving beyond web applications now. You have mobile applications, and you have all these different clients that are consuming this proprietary data. So basically future proofing their solution. And it's interesting, what I've seen in the field is a lot of coexistence use cases, right? So by coexistence, I mean Okta is living side by side with an existing identity management solution, which is usually on-prem. So what we end up doing here is we configure like a single integration point between the two IDMs. And this allows Okta to provide single sign-on and user management to applications that are already integrated with the on-prem IDM. So the benefit of that is that clients can keep the existing integrations and utilize whatever infrastructure investments that they've made. But all future integrations will be on Okta. And then they start migrating these legacy apps one by one to the Okta solution until they reach a point where everything is on the Okta platform and they can decommission the other IDM. So that's an interesting scenario that I've observed in the field.
All good points. I want to switch gears a little bit now and start talking about how professional services helps out customers who want to assemble or maybe redesign a B2b portal. So we'll start out high level. What does a customer need to consider when they're planning a B2B portal?
So again, this differs greatly from customer to customer. So I would think first what their vision is, right? Like I said, most of them want to future-proof it. So what is your long-term vision? How do you see your partners and partners interacting with your proprietary data and applications? Then the clients need to assess where they are right now, right? If they've made these huge infrastructure investments and they have an existing solution that works today, how we can bring in Okta's cloud-based solution and integrate it with what they already have. So at a very high level, the onboarding process, the offboarding triggers, once we get these partner identities, how we want to box them, what logical groupings we can make. Also, what do we want to provide to these partners? Is it just app access or maybe access to portals like SharePoint? Another key factor is, like I said, how else are partners going to interact with your data? Is it just these applications? Do you need to expose APIs for mobile apps? Do they need step-up multi-factor authentication? So a lot of components that you need to give a lot of thought to while planning your B2B portal.
Right. It sounds like a lot of what you do then is sussing out the requirements early on at a very high level, trying to understand their vision without actually talking about technology early on.
Right.
What are some missteps that you've seen customers make, and how do you guide them from a pro services point of view?
Right. So Okta has tons of documentation, right? It's very user friendly. So I've seen a lot of cases where the team that's doing the implementation is already ready. They've spun up their own dev tenant. They've tried out all these features, and many of them might have taken Okta training already, and they feel really confident going into the implementation. But I think what you need to understand is whatever you're trying to build or implement has to align with the overall goals of the entire project. It cannot be piecemeal, right? Also, Okta provides so much functionality that you might not be aware that there are certain use cases that can have very simple out-of-the-box solutions. So you don't have to make it overly complex. And then the other end of the the opposite side of it, where clients think it's really easy, but there could be downstream implementations that were not thought through.
Great. So what else goes into the thought process behind registration other than just collecting information? What if a customer wants to enforce tighter security by using multi-factor authentication?
Right. So in Okta, we provide the admins with a very easy way to manage user access, right? So everything is done at a group level. And you can create groups in Okta, and you can put people in groups, single group, multiple groups. You can move them in and out of groups. And the group construct is really very powerful. You can manage application access, sign-on policies. So all of this is applied at the group level in Okta. So that's the best way to manage your user access.
Good. So that's similar to how groups are used in the context of handling IT use cases for employees as well, because we use groups to also gate access to applications. We use groups to enforce single sign-on policies as well as MFA policies. So it's good to know that the same construct can be used for the partners as well. I'm sure our listeners would love to hear about some of the projects you've done. Can you share maybe some examples? You don't have to mention any customer names, but if you have any off the top of your head that highlight your engagement with them and what PS did for them, customers would love to hear that.
Right. So I was going through my implementations for partner portals. We did one that was very interesting. So this was a client, it was a large retail company with several dealerships. And these dealers were these brick and mortar dealerships. And the company wanted to give dealers access to certain applications and certain data. They had like a CAS shibboleth solution for legacy applications, and their prime goal was modernization, right? They wanted to move away from these legacy apps and refocus CRM to Salesforce. And also there was a big push from their leadership to move away from these micro web applications to more mobile applications.
Okay. So you mentioned that they're using CAS and Shibboleth. Aren't those cheap or pretty free solutions?
Yeah, I think their pain point was, just the maintenance.
Okay.
And also, like I said, they wanted to modernize their infrastructure. So they were future proofing. So then again, when we look at our portal building blocks, right, the components, where are these identities coming from? These dealers were actually created in Salesforce as Salesforce contacts. And as you're aware, Aaron, we have productized Salesforce provisioning built into the Okta platform, and we use this to get the user population into our native universal directory.
Okay, so was this their onboarding process? Do they have self-registration, or was the IT team, fielding phone calls and emails to get new partners onboarded?
There was no self-registration here. It was more of, it was the IT team doing all the onboarding. So they had a couple of homegrown applications that we needed to give access to. They also wanted to enable two-factor authentication for their network of dealers. And this was one of those coexistence scenario, right? So they wanted to have a solution that would allow for identity to coexist during the transition phase. So we were able to provide seamless access to partner applications like Salesforce, enterprise and community, few homegrown and SaaS applications. And these brick and mortar dealers were using them to do tasks like get estimates of product lines or maybe check delivery status, manage their customer base. Also, the interesting thing was, they had created a mobile app specifically for their dealers, and they used Okta's mobile development kit. So using the native mobile app, it would give the dealers to have these longer sessions using refresh tokens as part of the initial login sequence. These mobile apps were interfacing directly with Salesforce APIs, right? So using the Okta's user session, we were able to handle the transition where we were able to convert that to get a Salesforce access token, and then these mobile apps could access that. So these dealers are brick and mortar companies, right? Being able to support this kind of flexibility in the workforce was truly valuable and critical to the smooth functioning of this business. And this project was, the timelines were very tight, and we ran a tight ship, and we were able to deliver on time. So this was very successful.
Great. Any other examples that you would have for the audience?
Sure. So this was one of the more complex implementations that had, a lot of features. Some of the simpler ones that I did was, really interesting for a client that used Okta to provide identity infrastructure for, business partners in addition to their internal users, right, to access websites that would deliver customer-specific data. So these were actually WordPress sites with an associated backend. So they had this concept of a project where a project would have an internal case team and then the clients, which is, their partners. And they would capture registration information. The internal users could capture registration information, post the info needed to create the account in Okta Universal Directory. When the site was up and ready, email notifications would be sent to a link to that particular site to these external partners, allowing them to set password, recovery factors, etc. And we used Okta's out-of-the-box login widget for authentication. Once the project expired, we had this, we wrote this custom script to clean up all the accounts, to suspend the accounts of these external partners. So that's one. Another interesting one was, again, the subsidiary use case where there was the corporate entity, right? And then they had, I think, 6 or 7 sub-organizations. And they wanted a unified authentication experience, but the credentials of the users for each of these sub-organizations existed in their own org. So the passwords were not in the top level org. So we built this kind of IDP discovery that we built. So based on the credentials, based on the domain name, we could punt the widget to load that particular Okta tenant for the sub-organization. And that way we did authentication. So that's another interesting use case.
Okay. Now, all these examples that you mentioned, they seem to highlight the projects that went smoothly, but I'm sure that's not always the case. What are some key obstacles that customers face, and how does your team, professional services, help them with these challenges?
Right. I mean, all projects are not smooth, right? So some of the common challenges that I see are everyone's not on the same page. So the CIO or whoever the sponsor of the initiative is has different goals from the actual project team. So a lot of communication issues. Everybody needs to be in sync on the same page. And if needed, if it's a complex project, we need to really kind of break it down into different phases based on the complexity, the criticality, timelines. So that's one challenge. Also, some of the teams, they don't think long term. They don't see the bigger traps that lay ahead if they decide to go down a certain path.
And what are some of the specifics behind that?
Well, let's see. So let's look at API access, right? You have say a team, internal team, they decide to build out some APIs to simplify what they're doing. Then a couple of other teams in the organization hear about it. They want to access those APIs too. So, okay, great. Okay, you give them access. Now, the organization wants to expose this outside, right? And you haven't thought about access and how to handle the access to these APIs and all that stuff while it was internal. Now, when you're trying to expose it to the outside world, all these questions come up. Whereas if you had thought about it right at the beginning, it would save you a lot of time and a lot of pain. Also, another challenge that I see is, you need like just continuing on that theme there, you need to get it right early in the game. So a team might say, let's do this now and we'll worry about other stuff when we come across it. That's not right. So you must build scalable solutions and future-proof them.
Those are good points. Now, to avoid some of those obstacles you mentioned, people not being on the same page, groups kind of acting autonomously and building their own things, what are key questions that you ask or think about before even engaging with the customer?
So when it comes down to where I start work, right, the implementation, we have the statement of work already signed and everybody knows what they're doing. We kind of go through during our kickoff call, we go through that statement of work, we restate the objectives, we get confirmation from the client that, okay, yeah, this is what we're going to implement and that they agree with it, right? So we kind of reaffirm what we want to implement. What other questions that I might ask is, how are you doing it today? What's your ideal end state? And given your where you are currently, right? What your infrastructure investment is, the landscape, how can we find that path to your ideal end state?
Got it. I know we're coming up on our time limit. I'd like to summarize some of the key items that we've learned today from you. First, there are 2 to 3 common B2B patterns. There's the external partners, subsidiaries, and third-party portals in which Okta is embedded. Those are the key ones that keep on coming up over and over. The second point is, as with any project, planning and having a holistic vision is important. Don't just dive into the project and piecemeal it, or you might have to go back and redo a lot of that work you previously did. And finally, Okta's professional services is an invaluable resource. I've personally worked with some of these guys, and they came from the likes of Sun and Oracle. So they have deep identity expertise and they know the evolution of these technologies. And they not only have the technical expertise, but also the experience in seeing common requirements across industries. You heard it from Jo. She's done hundreds of these B2B implementations. She's also worked on B2E and B2C. So she knows the tricks of the trade. She's like a general contractor who's taken the lumps, dealt with the thorniest problems, and knows how to avoid them in future implementations. So, Jo, thank you again for joining us today and sharing your experience.
It was really great doing this podcast with you, Aaron.
To our audience, thank you for joining us, and be sure to stay tuned for another session of Meet Your Okta Identity Expert podcast. Signing off. Thank you.